In the soft bamboo pavilion, Lily anxiously awaited her fate. She knew the new emperor, Alexander, favored talented women. Determined to survive, she memorized poems, learned dances, and painted under Sophia's guidance. She prayed daily, hoping to delay the inevitable summons. But fate has a way of disregarding one's wishes. One day, an imperial decree arrived, and Lily was hurriedly taken to the emperor's bedchamber.
Serious, Lily, the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Personnel?
Lily nodded shakily. The authority in Alexander's gaze sent a shiver down her spine. He was strikingly handsome, despite his reputation for cruelty. Alexander sat at his desk, lighting a lamp to review documents, seemingly indifferent to Lily's presence. Hours passed, and as the night deepened, he finally showed signs of stopping his work.
Your Majesty, if you are tired, I can dance for you.
Lily's attempt to dance was clumsy. She stumbled and fell, her long skirt tangling around her legs. Alexander's eyes held a mocking glint.
That was a mistake. My true talent lies in poetry, Lily said, scrambling to her feet. But nerves betrayed her, and she could only recall a children's rhyme. Ashamed, she recited it. Does Lady Lily have anything else to showcase?
Lily swallowed hard, realizing this might be her only chance to survive. She decided to paint, hoping the landscape Sophia taught her would please Alexander.
Your Majesty, may I paint for you?
Alexander handed her a brush, his smile playful, and stood aside with his arms crossed. Lily faced the large sheet of paper on the table, recalling Sophia's instructions. She began to paint lightly, but her hand trembled, and the first stroke landed in the wrong place. Her mind raced, and the misplaced stroke resembled a compass. She decided to rely on her old skills. With a deep breath, Lily painted a landscape, mountains outlined with strokes, trees colored with ink. She poured her heart into the painting, hoping it would be enough to save her life. I held the pen and sketched for a while, and soon, a construction blueprint emerged on the paper.
What are these frames?
Seeing his interest, I felt a glimmer of hope and explained with a smile.
Your Majesty, these are not ordinary frames, they represent the walls.
I spent nearly half an hour explaining and guiding him through the blueprint. As my yawns increased, Alexander's eyes grew brighter.
You are right. If we build according to this structure, we can indeed save materials and accommodate more of our country's displaced people.
Of course, I thought with a hint of pride in my tired eyes. Before I traveled back in time, it took me nearly half a month to design this blueprint.
Lily, you must be tired. Go to bed first, I will study this a bit more.
I stood still, not daring to move. Without Alexander's explicit permission, I didn't know if I would be alive or face a grim fate tomorrow. Seeing my hesitation, he walked over, placed a hand on my lower back, and lifted me horizontally, placing me on the bed. I bit my lip. If my talents couldn't save me, I would have to resort to charm. With that thought, I reached out and gently wrapped my arms around his neck.
Your Majesty.
I won't harm you, nor will I touch you. Just sleep peacefully.
With that, he turned back to the blueprint, leaving me lying there, utterly confused. The so-called night of companionship ended up with nothing happening. Emily and Sophia were genuinely happy for me, while Victoria seemed a bit puzzled but said nothing. After all, there were only 4 of us in the harem, and any slight disturbance would be immediately known to Alexander. I intended to keep a low profile, avoiding attention so that no one would discover that I spent my night of companionship drawing blueprints. Rather than engaging in palace intrigue, I thought it better to find ways to maintain Alexander's interest in me for as long as possible. As expected, Alexander summoned me again for another night of companionship. The blueprint was still on his desk, but now it had several annotations.
I was about to perform my duties when he casually waved his hand, signaling me to come closer.
I have studied this carefully, but there are still some parts one don't understand. Explain it to me again.
His eyes didn't look like those of a capricious emperor, but rather like those of an eager child. Faced with such a curious gaze, for a moment, I wanted to pour all the knowledge I had learned in 4 years of university into his mind. But I couldn't. I had to hold back some information to ensure I remained valuable to him. As his expression grew impatient, I realized I had been repeating the same point over and over. Cold sweat began to form on my forehead. Suddenly, an idea struck me.
Your Majesty, do you think this blueprint is missing something?
Missing something?
It's the measurements.
To avoid making him think I was setting a trap, I quickly added,
Your Majesty, measurements require on-site surveying.
Do you have any special methods for this surveying, Lily?
If Your Majesty trusts me, you can leave it to me.
Michael narrowed his eyes.
Where did you learn all this?
I sensed the danger in the air. Emperors are often suspicious, and if he thought I was a spy planted by Henry, all my efforts would be in vain.
I have been interested in architecture since childhood and have a bit of talent. If I speak a single false word, I am willing to face severe consequences.
I won't touch your family for now. I will organize a survey team to accompany you for the measurements. You will be rewarded once the task is completed.
The scene was set outside the palace, where the sun blazed down. Sophia, busy instructing her subordinates on measuring angles and distances, turned her head and locked eyes with Alexander. A sudden unease washed over her as she realized he had been watching her intently.
Sophia, you've done an excellent job. I have a gift for you.
Sophia followed him onto the carriage. To her surprise, Alexander produced a memorial from somewhere and handed it to her. It listed, in black and white, the name and charges against Henry, the Minister of Personnel, Sophia's biological father.
What do you think should be done with the Minister of Personnel?
Sophia, having received the memories of the original Sophia, knew Henry was a high-ranking official who frequented ill-reputed places. Sophia had been born to a courtesan from a tavern. When Catherine, Henry's wife, found out, she had Sophia's mother beaten and the newborn Sophia abandoned. Fortunately, kind-hearted people saved her.
Your Majesty, there is much you should know about Henry.
Sophia knelt and revealed everything to Alexander. He listened, seemingly deep in thought. When the carriage stopped at the Su residence, Ethan, the emperor's personal eunuch, announced Alexander's arrival. Henry, along with his family and servants, knelt at the entrance.
Rise, Sophia.
Michael extended his hand to Sophia. Slightly surprised, she placed her hand in his and stepped into the Su residence, supported by him. To outsiders, it seemed she received the treatment of a favored consort, but in reality, she was more like the emperor's appointed project manager.
Sophia being favored by His Majesty is a blessing she has earned over many lifetimes.
Having Sophia is a blessing for the Su family. But I wonder if the Su family can bear it.
Henry began to panic, not understanding the implications. Catherine, however, failed to grasp the situation and signaled behind the screen. Grace emerged gracefully, holding a teacup, her beauty meticulously groomed. Catherine's intention was obvious. Seeing Sophia doing well in the palace, she wanted Grace to share in the favor. However, Sophia knew Alexander's interest lay solely in academic pursuits, not beauty. Grace's slender fingers held the cup as she poured tea for Alexander. Those same hands had once left dozens of slaps on Sophia's face for eating one of Grace's pastries out of hunger.
She looks nice. Is she a maid of the Su family?
Yes, Your Majesty. If she pleases you, she can enter the palace at any time.
Catherine naturally wouldn't admit that Grace was a daughter of the Su family, as it would be a crime of deceiving the emperor.
In that case, she can reluctantly serve as Sophia's foot-washing maid.
As soon as Grace spoke, her face turned pale, and Catherine was visibly shocked. Henry, trying to remain calm, feared that Alexander might get angry.
That maid, kneel down and express your gratitude immediately.
Henry was a man of narrow mind, only concerned with his own interests. He allowed his legitimate wife to punish the concubines severely, even letting his own children suffer without a second thought.
This servant thanks Your Majesty for the grace.
I looked at Alexander, feeling for the first time what it was like to be protected by a ruler. The measurement project was completed quickly. Alexander and I spent several nights perfecting the blueprints, and finally, we were ready to start the construction. One night, as he draped a cloak over me while I worked late, he suddenly promised.
Once the shelter is built, I want to name it after you.
Alexander intended to build a shelter for the refugees. That year, he fought his way from a remote region to the capital and eventually ascended to the throne. The previous emperor was incompetent, leaving the people in misery. It was only after Alexander's accession that things began to improve. From the perspective of the entire nation, he was indeed a wise ruler. Sometimes, I even forgot about the many concubines who had died mysteriously, wondering if it meant my heart was slowly leaning towards him.
However, Lily's courtyard sounds a bit awkward.
It's Sophia's courtyard. The blueprints were your work, they should be grateful to you.
I nodded in agreement.
I also plan to promote you to the rank of consort, with the title builder, symbolizing construction. What do you think?
I almost choked on my breath. A consort?
I believe Alexander has good intentions, but it seems unnecessary.
He seemed to notice my hesitation.
If you're not satisfied, you can choose a title yourself.
How about Olivia?
The name Olivia sounded similar to mud in my native language. When I was studying building materials, I hated concrete the most because it was hard to memorize, but I loved cement because it was fun to mix. Alexander didn't understand these nuances but agreed happily. Unexpectedly, the day after I was titled Consort Olivia, Queen Victoria invited me for tea. Queen Victoria sat regally on her throne, looking down at me. I maintained my bowing posture for half an hour before she allowed me to rise, the silent reprimand making me uneasy.
Sophia, oh, I almost forgot, you're now Consort Olivia. No matter what your status is, remember that the most forbidden thing in this palace is monopolizing the Emperor's favor.
Thank you for your guidance, Your Majesty. I will remember it.
Though inwardly I blamed Michael for summoning me daily to discuss the construction of Sophia's courtyard, making everyone think I was his favorite.
Since you understand, today you'll receive a minor lesson.
The nanny behind Queen Victoria stepped forward, raising her hand high. I instantly realized what was about to happen, but my body was held down, unable to move. Alexander walked in, his robe fluttering with the breeze. He pulled Olivia up and looked at Victoria with a blank expression.
I've been kind enough to keep you here, don't push your luck.
Victoria's face was full of sorrow. As they turned to leave, Victoria suddenly shouted,
Olivia, remember, emperors are heartless.
Before Olivia could grasp the deeper meaning of her words, Alexander, unable to bear it any longer, intervened.
The Empress is tired. She should reflect on her actions in her own palace.
He carried Olivia to the sleeping quarters like a chick. As they walked, Alexander glanced sideways.
You seem quite adept at building houses. Why are you so afraid when someone makes things difficult for you?
But she is the Empress.
So what? It's just a title. From now on, if the Empress calls for you, you don't have to go.
Olivia nodded. Previously, she was almost terrified of him, but now that feeling was slowly fading, replaced by a vague sense of dependence. Wherever Alexander was, it seemed to bring a sense of security. But what did Victoria mean by emperors are heartless? Olivia had no idea. She also didn't know if this growing dependence was a good or bad thing. Once again, Olivia fell asleep on the dragon bed. She used to need to sleep in her own bed, but now, in the emperor's sleeping quarters, she slept more comfortably than in the soft bamboo pavilion. Ethan seemed to have gotten used to Olivia's presence here, often waiting for her to wake up naturally after Alexander left for the morning court. The pillow still carried Alexander's unique scent, a steady and restrained feeling. However, after all this time, she had never truly served him in the traditional sense. Alexander went to bed very late every night, always after Olivia had fallen asleep. She even began to suspect that he might not need sleep at all. Tonight, as he finished reviewing the memorials at his desk, he looked up to find Olivia still awake.
This is rare. Are you no longer afraid that I might kill you?
I am here to help your Majesty undress.
Olivia had figured it out. Alexander might have some unspeakable difficulties, but he was handsome and she wouldn't mind. He had a strange expression on his face as he lay down under her care. The two of them stared at the ceiling, blinking.
Lily, do you know why I rarely sleep?
I do not know, Your Majesty.
He fell silent. After a long while, he sighed and laughed softly.
Because I don't dare.
Olivia was puzzled but didn't dare to interrupt, just listened quietly.
You might have heard that I obtained this throne by ending my own brother's life. Though he was indulgent and failed the people, we were very close when we were young. To ascend to this throne, one must be ruthless. Every time I lie on this bed, I think of his eyes, looking at me just like when we were children. He said, Alexander, you must be worthy of the world.
Olivia didn't know how to comfort him, so she squeezed his hand. His large palm enveloped hers, and they lay there hand in hand through the night. That was the first time I sensed the vulnerability behind his strong exterior, the first time I wanted to offer him warmth.
How about I tell your Majesty a bedtime story?
I would like that very much.
The professional knowledge I had painstakingly memorized before traveling through time suddenly found its use. I rambled on about architectural history, civil engineering materials, and even interspersed lessons on building construction, until I nearly lulled myself to sleep. Alexander gazed at my profile and smiled, his armor slowly coming down.
Perhaps he admires my extensive knowledge.
Lately, I rarely lingered in bed. Every night, I would tell Alexander a story, and after he went to court, I would return to the soft bamboo pavilion. My diligence puzzled even Ethan. In the cabinet of the soft bamboo pavilion, I had locked away the drawings I had been working on these days. Floor plans, elevations, and sections, they were designs for a new palace for Alexander. Under his governance, the national treasury had gradually filled, making the construction of a new palace feasible. I wondered if a new environment could help him forget the nightmares that haunted him every night. These were the most meticulously drawn plans I had ever created, each line carefully designed with all my knowledge. I had worn my hands raw in the process, and Alexander noticed it while we were dining together.
Lily, what happened to your hand? Summon the physician immediately.
It's nothing, really.
I hid my hand behind my back, not wanting him to see the calluses on my middle finger. This gift couldn't be revealed to him just yet. A few months later, it was the emperor's birthday, and a family banquet was held in the harem. Even the Empress, who had been confined, appeared at the banquet, her gaze towards me somewhat hostile, but I ignored it. As usual, Emily performed a dance, and Sophia painted on the spot. When it was my turn, I slowly presented a delicate wooden box. When Alexander opened it, his face lit up with undisguised joy. As expected, after the banquet ended, someone came to the soft bamboo pavilion to summon me. Alexander stood by the bed, and upon hearing me enter, he strode over and embraced me.
Lily, you've put so much thought into this.
That night was my first time sharing his bed. It's a pity that the construction of the new palace had not even begun before an incident occurred. The next day, Grace hurriedly walked out of the side hall and ran into Alexander and me.
Grace, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be in the side hall.
She had entered the palace as a foot-washing maid and should not have been in the side hall, where the blueprints for the new palace were stored. When the wooden box was opened, the blueprints inside had been shredded into pieces.
This is outrageous. Guards, seize her. She must be punished immediately.
Alexander was furious and immediately declared Grace's punishment, seizing the opportunity to take action against Henry's family. Faced with irrefutable evidence of corruption and treason, Henry could only atone with his life.
I had intended to wait for the right moment, but Grace's actions have completely enraged me. This ends now.
Henry's death was of little consequence to me, but the blueprints, which had embodied countless hours of my effort, being torn to shreds was truly regrettable.
I understand your intentions, and that's enough. Don't be too upset.
Yet, I couldn't lift my spirits and lost my appetite. How could I explain to him that it felt like a thief had broken into my home and deleted a thesis I had spent over a month revising? One day, the shredded blueprints reappeared on his desk. The pieces had been meticulously glued back together, seamlessly, showing great care.
I spent a long time restoring it. It is indeed as magnificent and beautiful as I imagined.
The construction of the new palace was about to begin when the imperial physician discovered I was expecting a child. Alexander was overjoyed. His usually stern face had become much more animated recently.
This is wonderful news! We must take every precaution.
He sent various supplements to Soft Bamboo Pavilion and warned me to stay away from Victoria, though he didn't explain why. I found it odd but assumed he was concerned that Victoria might pose a threat to my unborn child, so I didn't dwell on it. During my pregnancy, I became more suspicious and enjoyed spending more time with Alexander.
Your Majesty, why do you have feelings for me?
I was not well versed in romance and had never spoken sweet words. My only contribution was adding a few highly praised buildings to the capital.
To me, everything about you is endearing. The way you look while drawing, directing construction, and even when you lie in bed talking about architectural history, all those moments are precious to me.
I nestled in his arms, feeling completely satisfied with his answer. Alexander promised to personally draw the plans to renovate Soft Bamboo Pavilion for me. Watching his slender fingers meticulously sketch, I felt a sense of pride, as if I had taught him well. Aside from the confined Victoria, Emily and Sophia often came to visit me. Sophia, being young and innocent, frequently made me laugh with her childlike words. In the evenings, I would lean on the couch and watch Alexander work on his drawings, imagining our life after the child was born. I thought life would continue peacefully like this, forgetting that I was in the deep palace. Narrator, tone, serious. A mouthful of fresh blood splattered onto Alexander's blueprint. Staring at the blood-stained palace, my heart sank halfway.
Imperial physician, tone. Sirius, the child of Olivia? I'm afraid we can't save it.
The imperial physician prostrated on the ground, his voice trembling with fear.
Alexander, tone, angry. If Olivia's life is in danger, I will make the entire imperial hospital pay.
But in the end, the child was lost. Fearing I might not take it well, Alexander took extra care of me, even allowing me to stay in his quarters.
Alexander, tone, hopeful. Lily, don't be afraid. We have a long future ahead.
I understood that losing the first child since his ascension to the throne weighed heavily on him, just as it did on me. I nodded and closed my eyes to sleep. Suddenly, Victoria summoned me. Alexander was not by my side at the time. After much consideration, I decided to go. It had been a long time since I last saw Victoria. She looked much more haggard, like the palace itself, covered in dust over time. In the darkness, only her eyes shone brightly, as if they were ready to devour everything. I had never found Victoria so terrifying before.
Victoria, tone, sinister. Olivia, how does it feel to have your child taken away by the one you love?
Hearing this, I froze, not understanding the meaning behind her words.
Victoria, tone, sinister. You are a smart person. I know you understand. An emperor has no feelings. I warned you long ago.
Olivia, tone, serious. Impossible.
Alexander's image flashed in my mind. He had been as eager as I was for the arrival of this little life. How could he be so ruthless?
Victoria, tone, sinister. When other concubines in the palace passed away one after another, you should have known there was a conspiracy.
Victoria's words sent chills down my spine.
Victoria, tone, sinister. The new emperor ascends the throne, and ministers send their daughters into the palace, hoping to revive their family's fortunes through their daughter's glory. All of this is part of Alexander's calculations. Victoria, tone, sinister. The previous emperor neglected the court, and which official was truly loyal? They all colluded with factions behind the scenes. The emperor summoned their daughters to serve him, and the next day, he executed the concubines along with their families, slowly dividing the court and replacing them with people he trusted. Victoria, tone, sinister. Do you think you survived because of love? How laughable. It was all because the Su family didn't value you, and you were useful to the emperor. But how could he allow you to give birth to a Su family descendant? Victoria, tone, sinister. Those endless supplements sent to Soft Bamboo Pavilion were actually infertility drugs.
I stood there in shock, with only one thought repeating in my mind.
Olivia, tone, whispering. Alexander, how could he be so cruel?
Victoria had someone bring a bowl of tonic. I recognized it. It was from Soft Bamboo Pavilion.
Victoria, tone, sinister. This is what you drank the night you lost your child. Today, I will show you the truth.
A silver needle dipped into the bowl, revealing the poison. My legs went weak, and just as I was about to collapse, I was caught in a familiar embrace filled with the scent of dragon musk. A familiar voice spoke.
Alexander, tone, serious. Does the Empress have any more tricks? Let me see them clearly as well.
Alexander's guards were escorting a disheveled Emily behind him.
Angry, she has confessed. It was you who instructed her to tamper with the medicine. Do you have anything to say in your defense, Victoria?
His strong hand supported Victoria's lower back, helping her stay steady.
Defiant, Your Majesty, since you have discovered everything, why not depose me?
Alexander's voice was cold.
Sirius, you are my first wife, and I promised you the title of Empress. I never expected you to be so blinded and cruel.
My hands trembled uncontrollably.
Hopeful, do you believe what she says?
I glanced at the kneeling Emily and Victoria, then said,
Sirius, I trust only Your Majesty.
He gently caressed the back of my hand with his fingertips, signaling me not to be afraid.
Sirius, I did take action against those corrupt officials, but I have never harmed innocent people. Sirius, as for the concubines, I never touched them. I secretly sent them out of the palace to find good families far away. Sirius, Emily and Sophia are still young. It would be dangerous for them to leave the palace, so they were temporarily kept here. Sad, Emily, you tampered with the medicine under Victoria's orders, harming the royal offspring and trying to drive a wedge between Lily and me. It truly breaks my heart.
Only now did I understand the truth behind the point of no return and the guillotine. Those women, used as pawns by their families, were escorted out of the palace on countless dark nights, to live anonymously and free from their families' burdens. Seeing everything revealed, Victoria's face showed a strange smile, and blood began to seep from the corners of her mouth. Alexander looked at her.
Relieved, Your Majesty, there's no need to look at me like that. I know I cannot be forgiven. I took poison before making this decision. Sad, if we could go back to our youth, where you were not the emperor and I was not the empress, how wonderful it would be.
She seemed to finally breathe a sigh of relief and slowly collapsed. Emily was demoted to a commoner and left the palace. Sophia also left the palace when she came of age, marrying into a good family. Before she left, she tearfully held my hand.
Sad, Empress, you will be the only one left in the harem. Please take care of yourself.
After Victoria's passing, I was made the new Empress. All barriers were removed, and the future looked bright. But there was one thing I still didn't understand.
Curious, Your Majesty, why didn't you send me out of the palace back then?
Smiling, because of love.
Shy, answer seriously.
Cheerful, I swore long ago to protect only one woman I truly love, to be with her for a lifetime. Cheerful, when you said you wanted to paint for me, your expression was so determined and adorable. I knew then that I had found her.
I lowered my head, feeling shy at his sweet words. As an engineering student, apart from mixing cement, I still didn't know how to express my feelings. So I held his hand and sincerely promised.
Determined, if possible, I would draw construction plans for you for a lifetime.